Human Settlements Minister Lindiwe Sisulu is planning to de-densify informal settlements. This is government's plan to curb the spread of coronavirus. People from affected areas will be moved to safer places. For more on this, I'm joined now via Skype by Shenilla Mohammed from Amnesty International South Africa. Shenilla, good morning. Thank you very much for your time. I would understand the intentions of the government. I don't think it's each and every informal settlement. But this thing can't just be done anyhow. There has to be attention paid to a couple of basics. And you yourselves have said in the media recently that the human rights cannot be violated.
Hi, Dan, and good morning to your viewers. Yes, Dan, I mean, I think that, unfortunately, it has come, this de-densification has come at a time when, calls are being made for people to stay at home, calls are being made for people to isolate, and what happens if you don't have a decent home? So, what we're saying is that this de-densification, if it has to happen, although, we're saying this is actually not the right time for it, but if it has to happen, it should be grounded in human rights. I mean, you cannot, this cannot lead to forced evictions. It's got to include human rights safeguards and include genuine consultation with affected people, because this is a time when people need communities. They need the social networks around them, and if you pick them up and put them in another place, then this becomes extremely disconcerting and very difficult for these people.
Would you rather the government postpone the de-densification of the identified or selected informal settlements until after we've stabilized the situation, or, as the scientists say, we've flattened the curve of COVID-19?
Dan, what we think that, the better solution would be not to de-densify now, but that the government explores alternatives. And this would include equipping informal settlements with protective measures, such as facilities in the vicinity where people can self-isolate if necessary. And, ensuring that all those living in informal settlements, as well as those who are relocated, if they do decide to go ahead with it, are not cut off from their sources of livelihood, have access to housing, etc. So, we feel like, they need to look for alternatives, and they need to make sure that not, just the ones they've identified for, to shift, but everyone in the informal settlements has the safety, has the, the ability to self-isolate, has access to water, has access to sanitation, and most importantly, access to adequate housing. You cannot have the president make a call for everyone to stay at home when we know that a large majority of our people do not have adequate housing. And, as the Special Rapporteur for Adequate Housing, the UN Special Rapporteur for Adequate Housing said that in this fight against corona, the frontline defense is decent housing. It's basically staying at home. And so, what we feel is this is not the right time for this.
Yeah, so it's an issue of timing, because I was thinking, if you looked at it another way, Shenilla, is the de-densification of any informal settlement would assist in actually knowing how many people are there, and then being able to plan properly and what resources you will then give them, and be able to supply those basic services once you have de-densified the areas. In the long term, it could have benefits.
I think so. I think in the long term, potentially, Dan, but I feel like, we're not thinking about the trauma that will be inflicted on these people. We're not thinking about, the fact that many people will be uprooted from places that they lived in for decades, some of them. And it just seems to be, and I really feel that, the last 25 years of really not stepping up and providing basic essential services is now catching up with the ANC government. Because had this type of stuff been done a long time ago, we wouldn't be sitting here talking about these things. So, I mean, I agree with you that in the long run, potentially, it would provide safety mechanisms. But what we're saying is that if they are going to go ahead with it, it should be done with care. It should be done taking into account people's human rights, and also not just treating people like they are movable objects that can be picked up and dumped from here to there. We saw that happen during apartheid. We need to not do the same thing to our people this time around.
Shenilla, very briefly, have you expressed these sentiments to Minister Sisulu and government?
We haven't. We've released our statement, but I think that, we are planning to write a letter to her to basically ask her to reconsider and to look for alternative measures during this time, and just make sure that, the facilities that are required for people to stay safe and guard against coronavirus are actually provided to communities rather than inflicting additional trauma at this time.
Thank you very much, Shenilla Mohammed, speaking on behalf of Amnesty International South Africa partner.